China, 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 China. What sounds like the foreign policy of one of the world's leaders is actually one of the most hotly debated regions in League of Legends right now. Partially because this team is pretty damn good at League of Legends. RNG, of course, won the 2018 iteration of MSI, and we have such things as Tariq Yi being played on the Chinese servers, wrecking everyone's solo queue. Please don't do that in my games, otherwise I will AFK. And so to finally debate why China all of a sudden, or like for the last year actually, has been looking so strong, we brought in a very special guest to the third iteration of League Around the World, Raz, our English-speaking Chinese representative. Say hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
Very well. Of course, I'm still joined by Izento on my right or on you guys' left, and Ashley in the bottom as well, our LCK representative. Izento being for NA, and me being EU Pride despite wearing a P1 jersey. We're going to talk about franchising inevitably, because the LPL franchised this year. Raz, do you think that the franchising system, going from 12 to 14 teams in the LPL, still playing best of threes, having home and away teams, all this big infrastructure, has already helped the region in terms of like competitiveness and stuff?
I mean, here's the thing. It's a layered response. Ultimately, it's a big yes. It's a big yes because there's a lot of games happening. So if you're Invictus Gaming, if you're RNG, and if your major point of concern is getting games on stage, you're getting a lot of games on stage. Best of threes, as you said, and also the fact that there are, let's see, you play games every day except for Wednesday, it seems. Just the LPL runs a lot more often. Yeah. So it's really helpful in that respect. Obviously, there'll be teams like Vici and TOP that aren't very competitive. So like there's always that fact that, yeah, sure, you increase the size of the league, but the quality of the teams are just, it doesn't really change. It's still helpful in that respect. It's still very helpful for teams.
Okay, interesting. So one question that I have burning in my veins, when I talked to Forscourt about, like during MSI, about RNG doing well and stuff, and this was before group stage had ended and RNG were like looking for second place and stuff like that, eventually of course finishing first, she mentioned how RNG isn't even the strongest team in China right now. And a lot of people expected like Invictus to represent the region, and a lot of people being upset about that, like EDG at least, and RNG being like only the third one. So, like in 4 months' time, when there will be 3 Chinese teams, can we actually expect China all of a sudden to have a major impact and make 2 teams to semis and beat Koreans all out again?
Yeah, I mean, like, here's the thing. Chinese teams, I would contest and say that they've been strong for quite some time. Obviously, the last Worlds, we saw WE and RNG went to the semifinals. So imagining that more teams would get deeper into the playoff run, I believe that to be the case, even though it's still a long ways off. Let's say it's still a possibility that Invictus Gaming suddenly has 3 injured members. That's a possibility. Suddenly, Jackie Lowe, Rookie, The Shy, they're all gone. No, but yeah, I do believe, like, just to respond to the question, that you bring Invictus Gaming, EDG, RNG, maybe even if Rogue Warriors decide that they're going to be cohesive as a team. Like, there's a lot of strong teams at the top tier, top echelons of the LPL that I do believe will make a run. So if it comes down that the Shy is healthy, that EDG, there's no tilt factor from Clear Love. Like, if everything's working out in that respect and they get to an international tournament and actually perform, that those 3 teams will go the distance.
Damn.
Yeah, I mean, just even from watching a part of the playoffs for the actual LPL spring split season, IG looked like, I don't know, they didn't seem like they're themselves, and that's probably because the Shy wasn't there. And we've all been hearing about this legendary top laner, like, and everyone says that he's gonna shit on even Khan himself, and this guy's Fiora, I guess, is no match for anyone. So,
yeah, and here's the thing, it's actually super hard to tell, because with KZ, they sent their team out there. Khan had a difficult time as well, and a lot of it was based off the fact that Peanut Khan, like that top side in the map, didn't happen. A lot of the focus was actually like the meta was centered around centered around mid lane and bottom lane. Like they couldn't get the priority that they were looking for in draft. So the same thing could have happened in Invictus Gaming because they had a very similar style. I think stylistically it worked very well for RNG. So even though I thought that Invictus Gaming was the more like a better team at the time, I think that had they been in the same meta, RNG was just in a better position.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a ADC meta and Uzis on your team, I think that's a pretty good combination to have right there.
It's pretty good, yeah.
And talking about like RNG and how Kingzone was playing so bad in the MSI, traditionally we actually think that, hey, Korean teams are better at macro, while Chinese teams are maybe better at team fighting. That's like the general stereotype almost. But however, in the MSI, it almost looked like it was the other way, as if like Kingzone was the better team fighter and RNG actually had a superior macro. Do you think that Chinese teams, despite the stereotypes, are actually getting better at doing macro, or is it the specific characteristic of the two teams that made it to the MSI? What do you reckon?
Ooh, it definitely depends on the teams. I think for RNG specifically, their macro is much better along with Karsa. That's one of those teams that subbing out a jungler really changes their face, because when Karsa was playing during the regular season and he wasn't gimped with Zac with 3 losing lanes, when he had like a style that really benefited him, his macro, his early game and mid game play was incredibly surgical. But when you bring in MLXG, a lot of what he did was looking, or at least playing through lanes, looking to invade, not so much to play with pushing lanes, but to find skirmishing, like proper times to skirmish. So he was a skirmish heavy, team fight heavy jungler. So it really did change the face of that team. So yeah, to answer your question, certain teams in the LPL are very good macro wise. EDG is a good one, a good example of that. Invictus Gaming would be a good example. It just like that kind of depends. There are holes in that one, and RNG is. So like at the end of the day, some stereotypes ring true. I do think that team fighting is a major factor within the region, but their macro's gotten significantly better.
One more question about the franchising system, because the franchising system in itself is so much different to, you know, the NALCS franchising system or the partnership system. I don't know why we're calling it a partnership system in EU, but that's how it goes. For example, you guys have specific hometowns for teams and like home and away stadiums. Is that true? Is like I've tried to do some research on that, and it's of course a very new thing in esports in general to have like a home stadium of sorts and stuff like that. So can you elaborate a bit about how the whole system at this point works and how it's intended to work in the future?
Yeah, so franchising, a lot of, as you mentioned, the regions have that. With LPL specifically, they've gone a step further. Venues in specific cities like Chongqing, Chengdu, Xi'an recently for WE, Beijing recently for RNG, Hangzhou for LGD. These are all separate cities that teams have now are living in. So they have now put their home base in those cities. They're scrimming from, and they go to those venues. I think the best example of a team that's really benefited off of that would be Snake, because Snake in Chongqing really have a strong fan base there. I didn't expect it to. I would expect that as like, it doesn't matter where you go. If it's Snake versus EDG, there should be much more EDG fans. Like that EDG fan should just like kind of really drown them out. But that wasn't the case. There were actually more Snake fans than there were EDG fans. And they have their own chants there as well. So there's a real culture in there with the team that's centered in that city. So, and also there's a kind of a meme of like Snake home venue buff, because they were really winning quite a few games when they were at their home venue. So it's nice. So you really do get a lot of interesting vibes out of that. So yeah, LPL has many cities that they now travel to. And what's interesting is that because of the way it's centered and how new it is and how there are only 5 different cities now, teams are pretty much just based in their home city, and they don't really move away unless of course they're going up. Like if it's LGD versus Snake, then one of those teams are going to have to travel to each other's venues. But if let's say if it's BLG versus Snake and BLG is still centered in Shanghai, then it's usually like most of the time, 99% of the time, it's BLG traveling to Chongqing. So it's interesting that you'll see Snake just play a lot more games within their own venues. So they get the benefit out of that.
So I'm actually curious on how are the teams decided for each conference, because you guys had the group draw recently, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say this is because what's stopping all the powerhouse teams like WE or RNG or EDG to say, okay, I want to avoid this other powerhouse team so that I can dominate my own conference. So I'm going to strategize and say like, okay, I want this conference away from these other teams because stylistically I don't match up with them. And then also financially, there's a disparity as well too. So it's like, okay, I want to avoid these select teams as much as possible.
Recency is a big portion of it. So the pools are decided based off of where the team ends up placing in the last split. So like Spring Split just completed with EDG and RNG going to the finals. So suddenly EDG and RNG are pool 1 and they have to be separated. So like there could be that long con scheme of Invictus Gaming saying, you know what, summer is where I really putting my bets in there. Place me in a like pool 4 or something. Let me, I don't know, like let them undervalue me and let's see where I go.
Or drop a split just to have a better standing for summer. Yeah, it's very reasonable. That's definitely
even then it would probably be difficult. But ultimately, yeah, it's really heavily based on recency. The only real worry is that because of the city-based system, like let's say a good example is WE and Xi'an. Xi'an is based in the Western Conference. So now, if you're if WE was the super strong team along with EDG, and EDG gets their own venue as well, well, they're not being separated anymore. Like they're just based in their own cities. So maybe down the line, when these predetermined groups are very much like now Eastern Conference is just, or at least Western Conference is just ridiculously strong because all the strong teams are just based in the West. That's one of the concerns that you'll have in the future. And if you look towards like the NBA. Or NHL, that's already been a thing. So you're just kind of hoping that those teams get better. That's like a future worry, but currently that's not really an issue.
So talking about the home base and how gradually all the teams are getting assigned to a city, recently they had the opening ceremony for welcoming Team WE to Xi'an. Yeah, I don't know whether you guys watched it.
I think we've all seen it.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah,
I've seen pictures and some videos, but I didn't get to see it live, or at least like happening on stream.
Yeah, I didn't get to catch up with all the live stream, but I've definitely seen a lot of pictures, and it's just the scale is mind blowing. It's almost like watching the scale of LCK finals. You know, they rented out the whole palace. They do have the traditional dances, and that kind of reminds you just how much infrastructure and money is going behind LPL compared to the scale of the other regions, let's say LCK or perhaps EU or definitely the wildcard regions. Do you think that scale of financial support is a huge difference in LPL?
Yeah, I would say two of the major differences are, or at least the big, I guess, getting the ball rolling for me is the financial support's a really large one. That's something that you can't ignore. And it's been pushing a lot of these teams and pushing specifically Korean players to come to the LPL. I mean, right now, this split has been really strong with just domestic Chinese talent, but it's a benefit of TOP that's also a fairly wealthy team to be able to bring in Marin. So like that's one of those things where you're like, if I'm a poor team, I'm not going to just have bad players for a very long time. I can actually look elsewhere and bring in a strong talent. So that's nice. But the second one I would say is the people power, in a sense. The fact that there's always so much passion coming out of the crowds. Because when I was in Chengdu for the grand opening for OMG was not a strong team. Like they were one of the weakest teams in the league currently. And even in their opening day, they obviously didn't perform, but they consistently had people coming into their venues. The passion from the crowds were mind-blowing. And didn't matter if the teams were performing poorly, there were always fans for the players, always people who are really interested, like really like diehards for the teams. So yeah, the scale of it is pretty large, and you really get to feel it, specifically for like the big names, the big players, the big teams. So a good combination of both.
I mean, we even to an extent saw that during the MSI in general, primarily during the semi and finals, because there were hundreds, if not like a thousand Chinese fans present in that Paris stadium. But even in group stage, you know, like EULCS Studio, small venue, has been discussed over and over. It's like 170 people in there. Of those 170 fans, a good 50 of them are Chinese. And you're like,
I will say this: my favorite thing was VCS versus LPL, and it was literally the Vietnamese fans versus the Chinese fans, and they just wouldn't stop chanting. They're going into Champ Select, going into level 1s. I was like, they're gonna be going hard until the end of the game. Someone has to stop them.
Yeah, I guess some of them have had really sore throats at the end of that night, because that was really amazing to witness. Speaking of imports, not just Vietnamese ones, but primarily, of course, Korean ones. We just spoke about that with people like Marn coming in, and for example, Imp playing for 4 years in the LPL now. I've been wondering, has the because Mata played in LPL for a very long time as well. Looper, now retired, but used to be a really huge player. Played for RNG as well, was it, for a decent chunk of time. So it's like you have all these Korean legends to an extent going to LPL, especially in like the 2014-15 area. Has it benefited the region? And when you look at, for example, someone like Imp now, do you still think that a team should go with a Korean player instead of, for example, a Chinese one? Because I mean, Imp specifically has been kind of like, for the last 4 years after getting that World Championship. What's your take on that whole situation?
Back in 2015, when a lot of the Korean players were really, essentially the exodus was happening, they were coming in, and it benefited a lot of teams, specifically RNG, because even though they didn't have Easy, they had Mata and Looper, and they were really strong players, specifically Mata. So it benefited the teams, and there were a lot of questions as to whether it was going to like trickle down to the players around them.
Yeah.
And perhaps it did, because MLXGA and was always with them. And another one I would say that Ming did mention that one of the people he looked up to, I mean, a lot of supports will have that exact same point, is Mata. But obviously he was replacing Mata. So for him, it was incredibly important to pull things from him. And one of those things were like vision control. And he's been doing well at that. So ultimately, it did benefit it at the time. But there's not much, I would say right now, a lot of teams are valuing communication over just Korean players, because they have the talent. They're recognizing that, especially with WE and RNG coming out into the semifinals. And sure, WE is kind of like a weird kind of point to reference, because they have Mystic and Ben and Zero in their lineup. But they're a team that has always made a mention of communication. And so like they're a team that's really valued that. And their bottom lane has like gotten better at being able to communicate with the team. So that mantra is really just bled into the rest of the league, where you're just getting a lot of teams right now that just are running Korean-less lineups. And it's not to say that it's bad to have Koreans, but it's more of it's a better mentality of, we're not getting them just to get Koreans, but we're getting players that we feel like is the best fit for our team. If they happen to be Korean, that is a plus. And I think that's really nice to see.
Very interesting, yeah. Because we've seen similar developments, specifically in my opinion, in the ULCS. So like last year in Spring Split, like all of the import slots were essentially taken. There were like at least 1 or 2 Koreans on almost every team. And now this split, we only had like 3 players, I believe, which was of course a huge upswing. But the point is that I'm trying to make is that I now feel like there's a lot more thought behind the process. And in A as well, you know, you import not just any Korean top laner, but you import Huni, because Huni is freaking insane. So in for G2, you import or you take in Wadid, because Wadid is really good. Stuff like that. So there's more thought process behind it, rather than, you know, Arjun picking up Nehun, who has a 0-17 loss record in the Chinese second league.
That was a
disaster,
you go, man.
hey, he's Korean, so therefore he must be good. You know, that's I think a very good distinction to have, and I think it helps the players as well in that area.
Well, you know, there's also another hidden thing that I don't think people consider when getting an import or getting a Korean to fill out the roster, and it's that with doing tryouts, you have to actually fly this person all the way from Korea over to, you know, North America or Europe or whatever, and then try them out within your entire team, because most likely, if you're smart, you aren't going to just sign them and say, "Oh, hey, I've seen your play style."
That has happened a lot of times too.
Most likely, happens quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and this is the whole problem with scouting and analysts not doing it properly. And I think that's why we've seen so many imports actually fail, is because they don't do their due diligence and actually get this person into the team culture to figure out if they mesh together with, you know, whatever lineup that they're trying to build. And you can't have someone function in a lineup if you don't actually know how they fit 100%, you know.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I'll maybe play devil's advocate a little bit, because the process a few years back was actually fairly difficult to find some, like, fresh players, because it ultimately meant that you had to have, how do I put it, either a large say in the matter, or your reputation had to be good with it, because you're going to be getting a lot from your players. What do you think of this player? Like, I think this player is pretty good. Like, his solo queue is really strong. But then they're like, he's a solo queue player. He's not that. Like, that's the reigning mentality that comes through it. And they usually have to prove themselves competitively for teams, or at least players, to really start to respect that, or the organization themselves to start to respect that and be like, well, we're going to bring in a domestic talent rather than flying someone in. And so the Academy League across the globe has really done real good for scouting, made it a lot easier to be like, wait a second, I'm in North America. A lot of these players in the Academy League is really strong, and they've showcased that they can communicate very well in this setting. So you can just pick them up, and it makes it easier to just make this choice rather than going and looking at the Korean solo queue ladder. Same has been true for the LDL in China. Same has been true for it's Europe is a tough one, because you have national leagues, and technically you've always had that. But it's nice to be able to say that you can look towards now the secondary leagues and pick from them.
Ashley, you wanted to say a lot about that. Of course, you got to talk to a lot of Koreans that went overseas. I'm sure you've had mixed results at times, mostly positive, but some, you know.
So, like, I'm not gonna. So, Darius, you just talked about EU also going through that phase of importing a lot of Koreans to begin with, and then some of the Koreans phasing out, and the teams learning how to better deal with Koreans, and what qualities to look for when importing a Korean player. And Turkey has gone through a similar phase recently, because in the spring split, like, every single team had 2 Koreans, because last year they imported Frozen into Fenerbahce, and he just did spectacularly, and they started importing Koreans, and not all those teams worked out that well, partially because of the communications, and also partially because of some players simply missing Korea. So even though when the Turkish team re-offered the contract, the Korean players would want to return to LCK, because they're like, hey, like, because Koreans grow up in this very, very Korean culture where they eat Korean food every day, are immersed in Korean, like, language, and when they get out of the Korea, some people deal with it well, and some people, I just have to go back to Korea. Yeah, so And like it's a bit of a communication, like, are they good at English, but also are they the type of person that are quite extroverted and will get along with people from completely different cultural backgrounds, and are they like in a specific alignment that they will cope well in a non-Korean culture, food, environment, etc. So it's a lot of different factors.
Yeah, I
And
feel bad for those players. I feel bad for those players because, like, that's a good example. Turkey's a really good example of the infrastructure not catching up to the fact that they have, like, the financials to basically bring these players in. So, like, Turkey is incredibly strong financially. They can bring all these players in, but then they realize that they don't have the proper setting to, like, make them feel comfortable, choose the, like, have the scouting to choose. I would not properly, but like the best fit for their team. So it feels like North America I say China in 2015. So I would say the infrastructure will get there, and hopefully they can make it easier for the players that actually fly into that region.
Yeah, and another point which I want to make about importing any region of players is that they aren't going to perform at 100% when you first import them. So you should expect whatever split that you import them, that they have to acclimate themselves to the culture, to the environment, to the team, and to the different play styles, because every region has a different play style, and then the communication aspects as well too. So whatever that you saw them within their home region, they're not going to perform at that level. And sure, they might then be able to rely more upon their mechanics within the game, but that's only going to get you so far, especially when you're already at this highest level of, like the NALCS and EU or China and Korea. The mechanics of these players are pretty similar. So it's then becomes about the whole macro aspect and the communication aspect, especially with how the game is currently being balanced, one could argue. So to expect a Korean to suddenly perform like they originally did in their home environment to wherever that you place them within, Europe or North America, I think is just ridiculous. And anyone who has that kind of a notion is completely underestimating the problem itself.
And it is a case by case basis type of deal, because I think that a good example of the victors, like Supermassive, they came through, they had GPM and Snowflower, and they were amazing players. Regardless of what happened in the finals before they got out of the play-ins, I felt like specifically Snowflower was a massive upgrade mechanically to Rogu. I haven't seen too much of Rogu's play domestically, but Snowflower's a beast. That's just what happened. So, like, if you can import someone like that, that's a success story.
Absolutely. And yeah, like, for example, for someone like GBM, or, the aforementioned Hoonies, or Wadid and stuff, or Rainova, when you have people like those, if you get to meet them, they're very, they are mostly extroverted, some more than others, of course, and they are very adaptable, and everything's super cool, and then, because I get to interview these players, and then you get to talk to others, like, I remember talking to Hachani while he was at Vitality, and that was, I could feel him being unhappy while I was doing the interview with him, and it was like, this is not how it's supposed to be for everyone involved. Please, let's not make this happen again. And I think it's also something that, like, every region kind of goes through. EU has had this in the past. Turkey is now currently going through it and stuff. And going back to LPL, of course, the core topic, I would assume that now all the imports, as you've mentioned, have now a serious purpose and get seriously introduced to the team and to the culture and everything. And I would hope that everyone feels at home and happy. Now, let's talk a bit about, we've talked a lot about how the LPL has massively upgraded and has amazing infrastructure and everything is so great, yada yada. But
wait a minute.
what can other regions learn from the LPL? Because, so here's the thing, right? There are certain factors that you just can't copy. Player base is something you can straight up copy. The Chinese player base is massive. It is humongous. It is like, 80% of the League of Legends player base is in China or something like that. It's insane. So we can't just make that up, right? But we can grab money, for example, as NA has tried and has kind of failed still Just pump money into the system and make it work that way. Is there anything that you could pinpoint to and go, hey, in terms of fan support, in terms of culture, this is what you guys out there can change, this is what teams can change, this is what the league can change? What's your take on this?
Ooh, confidence in your style it's a player, it's a team thing ultimately. With the LPL, a lot of people look at the LPL and be like, man, this is such a team fight heavy team, but there's so many intricacies with a lot of these teams that there's no one style of the LPL. If you look towards Snake, they have their own weird shit that they have in the top lane. Like Flandre will just run his own damn thing along with SOFM, and they become a team about top lane jungle and how they play on top side of the map. And recently that's changed, kind of, and they've gotten a little bit better at team fighting. But they've been a team that's been decided on their solo laners. And you have teams like EDG that are like a lot more macro heavy, early game heavy. RNG that in the regular season were a lot more late game heavy, team fight heavy. A lot of these teams clashed stylistically, like a lot of them, because we had great top laners. As I move my camera, we had great mid laners, 80 carries, a lot of them. And when they figured out their style, they played to it almost 100% to that style. So confidence was a big one. If a meta changed, the first question would be, how do we essentially change them, or at least how do we make it fit our style? And so when you see an LPL team play, unless if it's CDG, because we always have to talk about that one, most of the time, they are incredibly confident with the best of ones that they have presented to themselves. They don't play passively. And I feel like every single time we see, not C9, but like a TSM come out to play, if we see G2 to a certain extent, there's so much passivity in their play. There's so much change that happens when they come into an international setting that it's never the same that we see from them domestically, because it takes them a while to be like, oh, we're comfortable now. Well, other teams are comfortable on day one. So that's my biggest gripe a lot of the time, is that teams try and change too much, or they just not confident and they feel like they have to learn everything all over again the moment they get into like touch ground in another country.
This is like going off the tangent a little bit, but so let's say EU is known for their mid laners. And Korea is perhaps known a lot for their top laners and mid laners, but LPL is always considered the home of the best ADCs in the world. And I would say that the ADCs of LPL is on the higher level, and they do benefit a lot more in ABC focused playstyle metas and playstyles. And why do you think that is the case? Is it because China solo queue has more focus on mechanics, or why do you think that ADCs especially do well in LPL?
So it's a few things. I'd say the one that really calls out to me, and I remember I have these conversations with Rusty a bit as well. Like idols are a big one. Like when we talk about Vietnam, a lot of the times we're always like, my God, you take 2 junglers out of that region and there's 2 more that pop up that are exactly the same, right? So like, and they
actually,
all really
it's 4 more. It's like a Hydra that we like slice off. Yeah, 2 more that come
exactly up. Right. And a lot of them are just like take inspiration from SOFM, or like with mid laners in EU, a lot of them talk about Froggen growing up, like Froggen this, Froggen that. And then in China, a lot of it is also Uzi. Like, so a lot of it comes back to the fact that if you have a legend on the scene playing at the time, even if he retires, he begets a lot of respect and a lot of players that aspire to beat him. And so you just have, I got tired after a while when there was like Prodigy after Prodigy, like Prodigy coming up. It was like, there's another Jackie Love coming up, another Prodigy in the 80 carry position. I was like, all right, one of these are not Prodigies. I'm gonna get real sick and tired hearing this word. Like I'm banning this word in the office.
And then you got the illegal iBoy up in the league. Just I swear that kid is not. He is not legal to play in the league.
2-year-old boy coming in there. No, but like seriously though, like that's the thing where a lot of these players, it's a new generation. So like this year was the year of new generation, rookies coming up. iBoy, who we couldn't even technically call a rookie because he played like a few games last year before getting into Worlds and was randomly confident and was already show. This small tangent. I've never seen somebody play like 2 games or something. It was a handful of games regular season. Goes into Worlds and is like, I don't really give a damn. I'm gonna play my game. So like that's already a problem. This guy is
pretty bizarre.
It's
amazing.
amazing.
Back to my point. Yeah, it's like a lot of it comes down to aspiring to be X. And then also another one is when you have your region is dictated by bottom lanes, you get teams that realize that the only way they can contest this team is through the bottom lane. Invictus Gaming had a real problem for years just because their bottom lanes were getting thrashed by Deft, by Uzi, by inevitably like iBoy. Like it was just like, wait a minute, our bottom lanes are always so far behind. They moved Kid around. They had like Time at one point, and then finally they got like Jackie Love, and they really held on to him for about 1.5 years or 2 years to the time when he was like legal, where he was of age to play. And so a lot of teams, it's like an arms race of finding a bottom lane that doesn't get smashed so they can play their style. So a lot of it it is a point of competition and also a point of growth and aspiration.
Man, and then we have our idols in NA with Pobelter.
No, but you guys have idols as well in a way. Like, I would assume, Cody's son always looks up to Doublelift. Every ADC now that comes into the scene looks up to Sven and Reckless. So it's like legit mini Trupax, Upset, Hansama to an extent. We have some good young ADCs in EU, and they all were like, yeah, I super look up to Sven. I think he's the best. I really look up to Reckless. I really want to beat him and stuff. So that kind of idolism definitely takes place on other leagues as well. Raz, I'm gonna throw you a statement, and you're either gonna catch it or throw it back into my face. But here's a take. I feel like the fact that we consistently see very different teams at the top of the LPL league massively helps the region, and it's partially because, as you've mentioned, every team has a distinct style, so depending on the meta that is played, or that is essentially dictated by Riot, we see other teams at the top, and we see different teams succeed. I think that massively helps the region. So when I, look at last year's MSI, World Elite is at the top, and I remember before Worlds, we did a little collab and I asked you what would be your top Chinese team of all the Chinese players. Which one would you choose in every position? And you put in 957 from Team WE back then. Now I've not heard much from 957 since, and World Elite in general. I mean, they had the unfortunate. The bad luck of facing RNG in their first rounds in playoffs, but still, we consistently see new teams, we consistently see new players, and do you think that's part of the reason why LPL is now so strong? Because you have a very strong overturn of teams and players?
Yeah, I mean, you never want a region to be dictated by a few teams. It's been exactly right.
Fnatic.
A Fnatic, because that's fair. But like the issue is always comes down to like competition in a lot of cases. You do want real competition to thrive in the region. And so while it's been true in LPL that EDG has been at the top for a very long time, there has been like changes, as you mentioned. 2017 was the year of WE, RNG coming back up as well. Teams like Invictus Gaming, a new one that's really taken a long time for them to find resurgence since season 2. That it's nice to see this because you have teams that do have very true, like stylistically are different, but it means that they are pushing themselves to a point where the LPL is so competitive that when they go out and play globally, that it's easier to play. And while I say that, Korea has felt that for so many years. So like, the fact that we finally feel that at least once, at least for a split, God bless. Like, God bless America / China. No, like it's like for the longest time, it's always been a worry for every region. It's like we're sending our babies out there. This is definitely a step up. Maybe they can grow. Well, Korea's like, all right, Just don't get lazy when you're getting out there. At least pull in 50% of the work, and things will go right. But now you're finally getting to the point where RNG is like it's an easier tournament, and our only real, I guess, point of contention is going to be Korea. While I say this, Flash rules are still a pain in the ass, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, I had the huge honor of talking to Uzi during group stage as well, and he was like, yeah, Flash rules actually are my favorites to win it all at this point, because they were just way more prepared than everyone else and stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, so like those are moments where like you still have to respect every team. They're still champions for a reason, and it's a best of one setting, but in a best of 5, now it feels like it's by far Korea and China at the top.
Fnatic should have won that game too, though.
I don't want to hear that. Yeah, I don't want to hear it. You guys better start team fighting properly, or else guess what's gonna happen?
It was 2 spikes! 2 spike steals!
This is gonna happen, buddy. This is gonna happen. This is what's gonna happen.
I don't have a horse in this race.
Okay.
I'd rip my shirt off, but I still have the rest of the show to go.
Like, this is like another thing. Like, one thing I really envy about LPL, and you might have to correct me because I'm only seeing it from the outsider's perspective, is Korea is known to be very harsh to its players, the fan base. Like, Korea is really, really known for that. Like, and even like the greatest team like SKT, if they fail one game, Inven goes crazy. Oh, you guys are disgrace to Koreans. And from top to bottom, every single team, like, because the criticisms almost seem to outpopulate the praises. And then I look to LPL, and you mentioned that even the teams that don't do it such as well, they get the love of the fans and they still are supported. And I always wonder that's why Chinese team can play that confident style, because one of the things that Korea has realized internally is if you criticize the teams so hard, they're not going to develop their own style, because if they try something new, oh, you guys failed, you guys try something different from the SKT macro style, you guys are terrible, and they beat you down, and that does impact how the teams play is, Do you think that's the case? Do you think that LPL fans are more supportive of the teams regardless of their performance?
I'll disagree on this one because there's so many fans. There are so many people supporting the team. Then I do believe it's human nature in every region. You got the Fnatic fans. We've seen those, those Twitter icons coming through. Same with the TSM fans. Like, if you are a major fan for a major team in your major region, a lot of people will have knee-jerk reactions based off of any, problems that happen in that team. And while with China, it is true that you have diehard fans for teams like WE, EDG, RNG. But if someone messes up, a good example of it this split was Haro, because Haro came in as a jungler for Clearlove. Clearlove is incredibly damn popular. He's like
an icon.
Yeah, he's like the second most popular player in the region, and I'm comparing that to Uzi. So he comes in, doesn't have the best split because he's a rookie. Whoo! There was drama around this one. So, like, it is true where you do get a lot of people praising you and defending you, but there are just that many, like a lot more, who are willing to throw you out in the fire. So Weibo is a big one where it's like, I mean, if you're an English or a Western fan, I usually tell people just don't check Twitter after a loss, or don't check Twitter after a victory. Just don't check Twitter. With Chinese players, I feel like just stay away from that. that is a lot of emotions flying your way.
I remember after the playoffs matches were drawn and RNG picked Fnatic, at least there was a Reddit thread, and maybe it was like some of the comments saying that was mistranslated and stuff, but apparently there were like multiple threads on Weibo, and like multiple people commenting, like dozens or hundreds of people commenting, like, you guys are cowards, you should have chosen Kingzone as your first opponent, you know, EDG would have just gone headfirst against the Koreans, you guys are scared, so dishonorable and stuff, and you'll get smashed by the Koreans now that you've like chosen them and stuff. It's like,
ultimately,
what?
passion is a double-edged sword.
Yeah,
like,
but I mean,
you get like great things from it, but
like,
then if you ever turn that near you, you're like, wait a second, I didn't want to use this weapon in this way. It's like, I loved you guys when you were happy.
But even like as a super passionate fan, you want your team to succeed and go as far as you would. Like the idea, I'm super passionate about multiple football teams, and I'm like, the idea of my team choosing the slightly easier opponent is like this most rational thing because I want to win.
Yeah.
It's like, what? How is that a bad thing?
Like, with all translations, because I do a lot of translation, take it with the salt of grain, because you get 1,000 posts on a single forum, and it's up to the translators to choose a single post and translate it back. And even though technically that post is correct, that may not represent the major like opinion of their forum. So yeah.
That's why with people, you should take those forums with, like, or at least those threads on Reddit with a grain of salt, because a lot of the times, like I've heard, and I obviously am not going to check through those forums, but I've heard from people who have frequented those forums that speaks the language. They're like, all right, this is real cherry picking. So a lot of times I'm like, I looked at those threads and I'm like, I'm not going to believe that that's what the main population is saying. It's probably just the most extreme words flying out.
Well, it also seems like going back to the city-based teams, and so we kind of have evidence of this with Overwatch League, you know. They're kind of the best example, but they haven't even fully implemented geolocation yet. But the whole point of geolocation is to get fans more engaged with the team. And it seems like China really does have more diehard fans for specific teams, and maybe that's a result of this movement towards geolocation, and it's a great way
before,
of
right? Sorry.
Well,
say again?
But like this kind of diehard fanship existed, or fandom existed before the geolocation thing, right?
yeah, but
I was about to say, because like, while I agree with the fact that it existed before, like it's about getting those flames a little bit better, or at least for the smaller teams, the teams that are like definitely don't have the fan base around them. It's like how you empower that.
Okay.
Well, I mean, so are there large differences in culture between the teams and, say, the areas that they're representing over in China? Like, you know, the difference of Shanghai versus like Beijing, or I don't know where all the teams are actually representing, but is there like cultural differences between the areas in which they have selected?
Yeah, there definitely is. I remember I had the benefit of going to Chengdu for OMG because we had the Culture Shock episodes, and Culture Shock is our show. Nice plug, Raz. Thank you. Is where we essentially go across China, these places that have accepted the geolocation locked in. So like Hangzhou, like all these cities. I went to Chengdu, and the best way I can explain it is that it's such a relaxing city that the people there are very much, they're not pushed to go anywhere. There's no stress involved in a lot of that. It's a very nice culture in a sense. Like I would love to go back once in a while. And also they pride themselves on a few things historically, but also in their hot pot and food. And you get that. It's difficult to explain how that kind of vibes into their the game that's being played. And I wish that I went to Chongqing, because we also had that happening there, and it really does feel like the Chongqing crowd are really behind the team. But yeah, there are major differences between these cities and regions. Like for instance, Snake and OMG, even though typically before this didn't have any rivalry at all. Like there's no such thing as an OMG versus Snake rivalry. But because Chongqing and Chengdu have had rivalry city-wise in the Sichuan region, suddenly that exists. And you're like, well, that's cool. That's weird, but it's cool. I'll accept it.
That's so exciting. Like, you know, all the cities behind, like getting behind specific teams, and eventually teams adopting the culture of that city. I think that's yeah, I think it's really cool.
So just for
So
clarification, so sorry. Oh, okay, we're done. Never mind then. Just for clarification, just to 100% make sure. So every team is represented in a city, but not every team has their own venue yet, right? But it's planned that every team eventually gets their own venue. Is that how
it's so the initial plan when it all came out was that there were going to be 20 venues, 20 teams. So right now there are 14,
right?
But by the end of the year, an LSPL team, or at least an LDL team, would have promoted. And I think that there's another team, like there'd be 2 teams by the end of it that gets injected in every year, to the point where there's 20 teams, and every team will essentially have its own venue. That's pretty chaotic even to me, but that's the plan going forward. And so yeah, that's the idea. Right now, the teams that don't have venues, that don't have cities, are all holed up in Shanghai.
Okay, interesting. Very, very interesting. I love to hear all of this from a traditional sports perspective, because, you know, growing up in Germany makes you love football/soccer, for those that you know other countries. And yeah, like from my own perspective, you know, I grew up in a relatively large city, but a city that has no good reputation whatsoever, and literally all the city essentially has is its football club and its rivalry with a different city. The derby has been going on for more than 50 years now. The other club finally got relegated. Screw you, Hamburg. Bye bye. But yeah,
a few viewers will have realized what you said and would have closed the video. You realize what you've done.
Bundesliga fans all around love the fact, but I think it's interesting how like sports and culture have grown to be so interconnected with another, especially in the past few years, with sports in general around the globe exploding and money being thrown everywhere. And this transferring over to esports as well. And, you know, I've always been very critical of Overwatch League because the intention is there, but the execution wasn't. That was always like kind of my take. But in China, in Chinese League of Legends, I very much see a lot of execution being done already at a very fast rate. Now, of course, a lot of that is also because you guys have so much support, so many viewers online and stuff. What's your take on RNG allegedly having 130 million people watching from China for the MSI finals? Is that an actual realistic number, or is that just maybe a bit of a stretch?
Look, I'll say from the statistics standpoint, the Chinese streaming websites have, like, I will never know. Like, there are certain points where you look at that and you're like, is that the viewer count? It's like, no, that's the popularity count. There's an equation to this. And I'm like, well, I mean, no, we've already had a problem in this conversation. So, like, yeah, when it comes to the statistics behind a lot of the sites, that is always questionable. But I do believe that a lot of people tuned into it. It was insane how many people tuned into it. And it's very difficult because you don't have the stats involved to it. But let's just say that, like, when I came back from Germany, I still heard about it, like from the office, obviously, but like there'd be people, like I would see random RNG jerseys, just like not like, and maybe it's because I'm situated near the office, so it's just like more people interested in esports in that direction. But it was pretty eye-opening to me. And just recently on the server, we had an RNG celebration where it was just like certain skins and all that, like 50% off, and prizes if you rock an RNG band on the League client. And then I actually just couldn't log in because, you know what, everyone was just online at the time. So like, sure, there's the monetary incentive in that route, but it felt like there was so much activity just based off that win alone.
Amazing. Love it.
Have you guys seen that video that came up on Reddit, which was like a combination of people in university dormitories screaming and chanting RNG?
That's pretty cool.
Right up the, yeah, wow. That was actually
that's pretty sick. I'm gonna find that afterwards. That actually sounds hilarious. I know that, like, I'll still talk to people afterwards. I haven't. I need to. Goddamn.
Kelsey Moser legit tweeted today that now at this point she feels like this Dorm video, or this Best of Dorm video, now stands for Chinese League of Legends in a way, because it was honestly baffling to watch. You just see like big buildings, and everywhere the lights are on, and everywhere you can hear people screaming from outside the windows and just chanting RNG. Oh, they've done it.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
It's so
I would
should
have
link
rather
it to
been
it.
here in Shanghai than to be back in Canada. What the hell am I doing with my time? But yeah, I've heard stories of people having, like there were a lot of, what's that? Goddamn, what are those parties when you just hole up in a house and you all just watch League of Legends together? And like just
A watch
Come
party.
together.
Chill.
Yeah.
yeah, I guess I could just call it a watch party. I mean, it feels like there's a better word for it. Yeah, I've heard a lot of those happen, obviously, and I just wish I was here for that. Yeah, there's a lot of passion for it.
Ah, that's so insane. Yeah, is there like is there anything that teams do to drive that passion that like people from teams from other regions, not doing any specifics, but something that you could look at? For example, EDG has their dog Nice, the small cute dog that has like 1 million followers on Weibo. Are there like any social media tactics to engage fans? Is there anything you want to throw
Yeah,
in?
so social media tactics. Everyone has a cat, but no,
Good.
seriously, like
Every LCS team get a cat. I approve.
like social media presence has been strong for a lot of these teams. Like the whole cat dog nonsense. Nice has been a really good example of that. But also it feels like, and I always reference EDG just because EDG has been a team that's really put in a lot of work in their content team. A lot of the stuff they even have their own application, and sure, maybe you can just allot that to the fact that they just have the financials for that. But to rally up their own base, there's a lot of community engagement online and offline. Because even when I was at Chengdu, there were a few points where it's like the fan meets, but also they had a lantern festival that they were kind of just taking place for their fans. And it's cool to see that. I think having a venue makes it much easier to do just that, because suddenly it's the difference of being a very team specific, what can we do while the fans are here for the games to make them be more fans of us, or at least just enjoy themselves a little bit more, in comparison to LCS, which I think there's a lot of fan engagement for the LCS. But if you're talking about team engagement, it's really only like after a game, we'll take pictures and sign with the fans, rather than finding a creative event to kind of partake in that. So I think with the LPL, we have the benefit of being able to just inject more team-driven fandom because of this.
Okay, so what have we learned so far? Everyone needs a lot of money, but besides that, definitely go for a very distinct playstyle. Try to find your playstyle. Try to find your way of playing the game, and potentially drive fan engagement with that. I think that's, for example, something that Immortals formerly used to do. That's something that Unicorns used to do. So they have specific styles that are a bit crazy, bit out there. So that helps. Fan
I want to interject and talk about the Immortals brand specifically, because I know that Noah has been this advocator for team engagement instead of player engagement, because there's a big difference between the two, and that's why we've moved to a franchise model, because it gives a little bit more power back to the team specifically, because then they're able to get revenue and they're able to actually hold their own against all these player salaries skyrocketing, and so the problem that's within the entire NALCS and even to Overwatch League to an extent is that, well, okay, how do I monetize the fans and how do I engage the fans? And a lot of what he's trying to do is through these types of fan meets or engagements. I think he just recently held a summit for women in gaming or in esports. And so he wants to tap into specific audiences that he has access to as far as his team branding. And he wants to have people be fans of teams specifically and not just players, and not just, okay, well, I lost a shit ton of fans because Doublelift left CLG and went to TSM. And so his whole following is now going over there. And so it's all about changing direction of focus, of having focus on the teams instead of the players. So
What's your take on that, Raz? Because say Uzi leaves RNG, is RNG still gonna be that amazing brand, or is Uzi gonna take all the RNG fans with him?
Like, it's gonna take a lot. And, like, here's the thing. Like, ultimately, like, you're right. Uzi is a kind of an exception. My take on it is you can build your team brand to be strong enough where if you do lose a player, it's not the end of the world. Like, that's fine. But player branding is so important for branding of a team because that's the face, and a face really does matter in selling your team. So if you bring out a face, like Uzi is a good face, Clear Love is a good face. Let's say if I look to Billy, Amazing J is a very good face, and they're strong performers as well. But like being a strong performer is also something that really drives people to love players. So player personalities, maybe even Sneaky. Let's just say if Sneaky was an average player, right now he's a very goddamn good player. But if Sneaky was just an average player, but an ultimate memer, people would still love Cloud9 because Sneaky is an incredible person. There's the same thing with I'm a Cutie Pie. I'm a Cutie Pie was an incredible personality, and people loved him. People love the identity of Dignitas because of the branding of the players. And so I think it's very difficult to say, man, if you lose your best players, if you just actually strip away the players and then get a new team, like, can a team survive from that? My answer is that probably not. Like, it's going to be very difficult, but your fan base is leaving en masse. Like, maybe a few people would be like, I love RNG because RNG is a team that, like, I stand by. And maybe with city-based systems, that's going to be the case because that's your team for a different reason. It's the same with NHL. Like, Calgary Flames has sucked dick for a long time. Excuse my French, but they've sucked for a very long time. Found it hard to make the playoffs, but I'm still a Calgary Flames fan, even if they lose Jerome Ginla, because guess what? I'm still in Calgary. So, like, it's a reason to love the team, and players are a massive reason to love the team. And if you don't have players, you better have another reason. I think trying to build around a team is difficult if you don't have that.
I think, definitely. It needs to be a mix. But it's definitely a question as well for smaller teams in general. Because, you know, when you are a smaller team and you find some hidden gems as players, you know, you find some really talented players. Say, Mike Young on P1, randomly making that one up, of course, on the spot. Or, you know, Unicorns of Love getting someone like Xerxes, who's, according to many people, one of the best, if not the best jungler in the EU. It's hard for those smaller teams to keep those players. So they need to find a way to properly have all the same fans at the same time.
Yeah, and you know what? I think two teams that have been very successful for what they've had to still drive fandom is, funny enough, Unicorns of Love and CLG, because for Unicorns of Love, they were known as a very well-branded team about like flamboyant, obviously, like the crowds are all in it, the pink, like, unicorn, even though they lost Gerard, like their manager going off to North America, they still kept on to that identity while still losing a lot of players and still having a lot of difficulties throughout the split. So that team was very successful in keeping a brand regardless of the players. And CLG, a team of faith, a team of like a lot of the same CLG like memes still coming through, even though they lost Aframu. Like, sure, a lot of the fans of CLG ain't feeling that. They're like, wait a second, why do I love this team? That's because for now, like with how esports is, players are still a major reason for their branding. The CLG, if it was any other team that isn't like TSM, like if it was like what's a throwaway team in North America?
Guardians, FlyQuest.
Oh my God, there's a team in North America. Wait a second. That FlyQuest or something, like just another team, like that doesn't really have a branding to it. Like let's say even a C9 actually, because C9 is still very much player branded. If you put like a lot of those random, like a new team entirely, a challenger play, like all these challenger players, throw them on a C9, people are like, wait, why do I love this team? Like, that's a real question suddenly. And I think that CLG and Unicorns of Love has still kept on to that, while obviously taking massive blows of losing major players.
Sure. Okay, so what have we learned so far? Again, money. But drive fan engagement, and fan engagement is huge, and try to find creative ways of getting that. in terms of playstyle and gameplay, try to find your own style and try to pull that through. And sometimes when you lose something because of the meta does not fit your playstyle, do you just accept it or you just kind of adapt? Because, for example, Misfits, I bring them up as an example. At Worlds last year, fantastic team, had their own style, almost brought down SKT. Come into LCS, their style doesn't work anymore. They still try to pull it through. They force it through, and they don't make playoffs. So
you still have to adapt. That's the name of the game.
Yeah.
But like, you still have to understand what your play style is. It sounds like some existential crisis. Like for instance, Snake is a good example of a team that's tried to force a top lane heavy play style for numerous times. And then they ultimately, when it comes to playoff time, is like, we're the Shen team. Like Shen can split push and Shen can do well inside lane, but Shen's gonna have to team fight. That's an adaptation, but still recognizing what they're good at as a team. And another thing is a small point. It's like confidence in your playstyle, but also like still, like I mentioned the academy point as well. Like even before academy teams were a thing. Like some of these major LPL teams like EDG still had like B teams or in-houses. Like they would have players that they run through their own academy thing. Before, like I would hear about like iBoy is a good example of a player that didn't run through LDL. Like they didn't go through all these challenger teams. He just came out of nowhere. And I was just like, well, he's a solo queue player, sure. But he was still in the EDG house, like practicing and going through the scouting motions through the team, through Aaron for quite some time. Yeah. So these teams have run academy teams, even though they really haven't had any monetary benefit coming in from like the LDL or LSPL. So a lot of these players that are homegrown coming through, and you're like, well, I mean, sure, they have a lot of players in the region, but a lot of these LPL, or at least a good portion of these LPL teams have done a good job of bringing them up.
Well, and that's what's going on with NA. It's just like, okay, let's just find solo queue talent, right? Or let's import someone, and there was no real structure as far as like sister teams. Those were a big thing over in Korea, and then also, now in China too. And it's just going to show that system actually works. It's a solid plan in order to build up rising talent and then give them an environment and a chance to be able to work their way up instead of just suddenly shoving them into the biggest tournament of their lives, with the LCS stage. So I think that's
and also so in LCK, Africa Freaks, not many people predicted them to do too well after Marine left for China. And they got a semi-rookie Kin into the top lane. And surprisingly, Africa Freaks did really well, and they went all the way to split finals where they lost against Kingzone. And a lot of people attributed Africa's success in the 10-man roster they have. They have a sub for every single position.
Yes.
And because of their success, now other teams are also doing that. And Africa, in one of their interviews, mentioned that, hey, it allows us to screen internally between the players, and that's one of the benefits, as well as having those subs on every position means that you can try out new rookies every time. So a good example of that, KT Rolster. So KT Rolster last year, I don't think had any subs. And despite the fact that they were like this huge super team, they didn't perform as well as they expected. And coming into this split, they just tried out this rookie Yukao, literally, like you said, straight out of solo queue, subbing for Pawn, who is like one of the legendary players. And he's been doing super well, and having that room to try out rookie players. And hey, it turns out, even though he's new to the stage, he's playing amazingly well. It's quite good. So I think more LCK teams are going to try adopt that 10-man roster style where every position has a sub. So it'll be quite interesting how that works out, because KSB was hiring, SKT was getting new subs. So I think that's, yeah.
I really do enjoy that from the LPL mostly, because there are so many teams running 10-man lineups. It's insanity. My job is so much harder because when I work on the day, I have no idea which player is playing. Sometimes it's like, man, I'm really excited to see like these two teams play. If they have, wait a second, they've just subbed out their most important players. Like, or at least if you're a Dan Gaming, you've decided to sub out your entire star line, like front lineup, and then put in your sub lineup. And you're like, well, what did that benefit? And it's a lot of like, there's a lot of internal like structuring of like, we're getting these players out because you guys are obviously not performing. And then you find players that are actually doing quite well for themselves. You're like, well, actually, there's real competition within the team now. So for some of these teams, if I were to look towards a team, I'd say OMG, obviously having 3 jungles, that's a team where I'd look towards and say, you know, I'm actually questioning this decision because I would like more consistency. But if you have RNG, it had Let Me and Satai, that both of them are strong players, but now they're competing within the team of which one fits the team better. Like, that's a really nice environment to have. It's difficult to have that environment like North America because they've tried that. But the problem is, you know what? You know, I'm too good. And there's like a 7th or 6th place team that is obviously talent deficient. I'm going to go to that team. So talent for like North America and EU didn't really help the style along because it was like, well, if I'm a really good player, why am I sitting on a bench? I'm going to play on another team. The LPL, it's gotten to a point where there's just so many strong players that still exists kind of, but you're in a position where it's like, I'm actually not going to get another team. I'm probably going to get an LDL team. And a lot of the players that have dropped off from one split to the next have gone to LDL teams because there's just so many talented players on the LPL.
I think that's also attributed to like a cultural thing too, because with the Korean culture, it's like, okay, you stick with one company, you're loyal to that company, you work your way up and so forth. But in North American society, it's just like, okay, I'm way better than whoever the hell, I'm going to go somewhere else. Someone's going to pay me eventually. And so you put your loyalty within yourself and not necessarily within a team or an organization. So we get these people from solo queue, this solo queue talent that everyone is then saying like, oh, you're so good, you know, like Dardoch, for instance, right? Everyone's saying, oh, this player is so good, like, and that gets instilled within their mind, and suddenly they can jump from team to team because it doesn't matter. They know that they need this talent in order to succeed, and also that is too attributed to the whole franchise model and relegation model, because in the past it's just like, okay, I need this or else my business tanks and I don't have an LCS team anymore. So I need these really good players in order to survive. But now the stakes have kind of changed to where we're in a franchise model. So you don't have that risk, at least for the long term. So you can invest in the short term and say, okay, I want to, or you can invest in the long term and you can get a rookie to then develop over a longer period of time. And I think eventually North American teams are going to be able to realize this and put resources into their academy team. So
yeah, that's an interesting discussion, because I think that, I don't know about culture having a role in that from like a Chinese standpoint. What I would say is that talent is definitely a thing. Like, for instance, Dardoch is an incredibly strong jungler, so a team would definitely want to have him onto it. So like, he can have that confidence because that's true for him. But with like the LPL, if I look to one of these teams, like the worst team is Vici Gaming. But Vici Gaming's problem isn't necessarily talent. You can say top lane, but they have Long, and Long is a very experienced and talented top laner in the LPL mindset. They have Swift in the jungle. They brought on Swift, sure. That's a very strong jungle. You're not going to be changing that. You have EasyHoon in the mid lane. Now, the only reason you would change EasyHoon is for stylistic reasons, but he's a very strong mid laner. And then, like, you look towards the bottom lane, and that's where they're starting to run in their academy points. So, if, like, Martin, Snow, Caveman is a very strong support. So, even with the worst team in the league, a lot of it isn't really just a talent issue. It's more so, I don't know if this guy can fit in a team. So with team like with North America, getting to my point, I feel like right now they do have an issue of trying to find like the best talent to compete. And so if you're a really talented jungler, every team wants you. That's just how it works. You don't have 5 or 10 strong junglers that you're like, well, I mean, I'm gonna have to make it work on this team, or I'm not gonna have a position. So there's no kind of bargaining. There's no bargaining chip there. That's the difference I see.
Damn. Yeah. NA talent pool, mid lane talent pool is.
And I mean, like, LPL, I just noticed the 2 bottom teams, the VC Gaming and TOP, have 2 world championships. Easyhoon and Marin.
Yeah.
I'm just going to leave it out there. Wow, that's amazing. The 2 players
insane.
that have skins, like, actual world skins against them, are the 2 bottom.
Let me tell you, the fun that we had behind the scenes, and we were like, okay, we're about to have TOP go up against VG Gaming. What's the narrative going to be, guys? Well, it's like, we're going to have a lot of fun because this may not be a top quality game. And it's like near the end of the season, so they both know that they're not going to make it. But we're going to have SKT memes everywhere. We're just going to be like, world champions here, world champions now. But like, it's funny because like for TOP, they were a team was like, well, we do need talent. Like that is a thing that we are struggling for, right? So even though I made that point earlier of like, there's a lot of teams that are very talented. That's the case now. You can say, but like for TOP, they immediately just said, well, now we have Marn. So we're gonna be taking players from other regions because we have that much like money and infrastructure for that.
So, what to learn from LPL? Money.
Yeah.
Oh my god!
I feel like
we need more Steves.
Where are the Steves? Import the Steves. Why are we importing players? Import the billionaires. Like, what are you guys doing? That's the lesson we're leaving with the net, guys. Your import slots should be billionaires.
Yeah, like where's Jeff Bezos' League of Legends team?
We need some Jack Ma's up in here.
It's insane. But yeah, I mean, it's to an extent that's kind of what Immortals tried, and maybe that's kind of what they failed. But yeah, that's a whole different story. And apparently needs even more money. Screw you guys. We're like sitting on a little bread salaries.
Yeah, just clone
like
Steve.
That.
Steve squared.
Yeah, we just need EU Steves. Okay, that's the key takeaway. But okay, first, always the most important takeaway: money, fan engagement, very important. Stylistic choices, confidence in yourself, and try to push talent to the best of your abilities. If you, of course, China has the huge benefit of the player base, but still, EU and Korea still have huge servers, so I think that's definitely a good takeaway to take from there. Because I also feel like, and even with NA, I've mentioned this in previous iterations, but the fact that certain players hog their spots on teams because they've been there, they've been in the LCS for 3 years, right? But they're not even really that good anymore, but because they're well-known players, and then people like Lemonation still get a slot, and you're sitting there like, well, what's the point, dude? Like, surely there must be players, and no disrespect to Lemonation, I think he would be a great coach, and fantastic in those roles, but like as a player, surely there must be talent, but I think it's also a mentality issue of just teams always wanting go with the safest route, go with the most established players, and just don't care about anything else. Giants kind of did that in EU, and it didn't work out for them either. But so yeah, that's another key important point. Go with talent, push talent. Is there anything you guys wanna ask Raz, or are we just gonna let Raz have his final plug? Why everyone should be watching LPL?
See, okay, so I have been burning to know about this exclusive Chinese server, right? So why don't you explain a little bit about the server first and like how it operates and whatnot? And then secondly, I'm wondering, do you think this server is going to have a long impact on like the entire player base, or at least the higher echelon of people that are prospective pros? And can EU or NA do a server similar to what China is doing right now, or?
I guess this is probably the easiest answer for me because I have no idea, dog. So like I've heard about this server when I was coming in, and I have like the benefit is obviously there's a lot of players, a lot of servers. There's I think 20 servers. I forget how many servers there are in China that just combine into each other. So you can actually combine a lot of these challenger players into this mega servers that works out well. I haven't even heard too much about it, quite honestly, because my biggest worry is always the biggest worry is that, you know, if the queue times are poor in, you know, or at least there are contentious queue times elsewhere, then why are you going into a smaller server? It's always been my worry. I don't know about how effective it is, but for the most part, if I want to watch a Chinese player play the game, they're likely playing in Korea or China. So I would love to know more, but I think I haven't dig too much deep into it because I've never ran into a problem where it's like, I have lost track of where this Chinese player is. Like, where is this LPL player? Is he playing on the secret server? That's never been an issue for me because it's always, he's either playing in the Korean server or he's playing in the Chinese server, which is actually near impossible to find anyways.
So just for clarification, as someone who doesn't know about this, apparently from what I've just taken in from context, there is a secret server where Chinese high elo challenger players play and only those players are allowed? What?
Yeah, it's supposed to be Diamond 1, right? Is the cutoff, so you can only get invited to the server if you're Diamond 1 or higher. So that means inherently all the professional players have access to this server. And when I first heard about this, I was just like, okay, so if this server now exists, then why don't all the teams end up boot camping in China before Worlds? Because now you have this huge player base of non-pros already that play on this server, you know, because of D1, and you have this really high quality solo queue. So there should be really no reason as to why anyone wouldn't boot camp over there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Ultimately, Korea has just been the place to go to because it's so easy to access from from Taiwan, from China, from Japan, like everybody. It's like such a great hub, and obviously the Korean players are incredible to begin with. That's been the major point of like the motivator for teams to even go to Korea. So, and of course the ping. Everybody loves the ping. You gotta love the ping. So
and the ping.
So like Korea has been the most competitive place to go to, and also if you just look at, if I watch like Chinese solo queue from a stream, it's a lot of fighting. So like you'll love it. You'll love it if you go in and be like, there's a team fight happening level 1, level 3, level 5. Like it just never stops. And maybe I've heard that it's true for them like a little bit in Korea as well. In level 1s, they just all in. But high quality play is always going to be in Korea because you're not necessarily having Korean players move to China or to the Chinese server. People are moving to Korea to play against these Korean players. So unless if these Korean players have decided that there is a reason to go to the super server, now they're staying right where they are. So I don't think it will change unless if it's like a long-term thing where suddenly China is the best place to go to for practice, and then you're like, well, wait a second, now we're packing our bags to Shanghai.
I just looked it up, and this server does indeed exist, apparently. I did not realize. That is very interesting. And yeah, it's Diamond 1 that is kind of the cutoff. You get instant level 30, 20,000 IP. Is it 200,000? 200,000 IP, 200,000 LP, gain 1,000 LP per win, which is weird. But yeah, there's a funny comment that I now want to read to you guys. Dear friends and family, it has come to my attention that in order to continue my pursuit of professional League of Legends, I must move to the mainland China. There's finally a server that fits my needs as the elite player I am by removing my shitter teammates, as they are the only reason I'm hot stuck Gold 5. As part of this journey, I will be starting a GoFundMe to amass $1,300, which is, of course, Zhao Zhao's standard rate for Gold 5 to Diamond 1 boosting.
My god.
Aside from cash, any Taco Bell gift cards or Mountain Dew 2 liters would be appreciated, as they're ideal
like a future app though, man.
for my journey. Yeah, it does sound like that. That's a fantastic pasta. Raz,
these are the players we're trying to reach out to, man. These are the guys that aspire to be the Zhao Zhaos of the future. Then we need to get these young players. No, that's my take.
Yeah, absolutely. Raz, you want people to watch LPL in English, I heard. Maybe because it's part of your job. maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Possible.
Why? So we've heard a lot of good reasons. You know, a lot of teams have individual styles and stuff, and there is an English-speaking LPL community on Twitter that I very much respect. And a shout out to all the people watching that. I have a lot of respect for fans and fandom, and that's very nice to see. But to all the plebs out there, to the TSM fans and CLG faith havers, to the Fnatic fanboys and G2 era boys, why would they watch LPL? Why would they watch RNG against EDG?
Now, see, people, he called you plebs. I didn't call you plebs. I think you're all valuable customers. I mean,
you flamed them twice with your soccer talk, and
I know
now...
what I'm talking about. You know, I said they were all handsome human beings that should watch the LPL. But all you people out there, no, the LPL, like, I made a mention of it. It's an incredibly fun league to watch, no matter the team. People call it fiestas, but if we're talking about the styles involved with it, there's a reason why it was one of the fastest. It was the fastest major region in terms of game time, is because it was the what's the I had my own saying for it, but now I've got to just say something that's actually used by the human population. But no, it was like sink or swim in a lot of cases. So a lot of the times you'd see a team live and die by their late game style or early game style, and you'll be like, wow, that blew up in 15 minutes. But like it's really fun to watch that kind of never give up attitude in a lot of cases. So fun games, incredibly talented players in a lot of these teams. If your question, and there were a lot of questions, I read Reddit, of where the hell is Rookie? Well, I've got an answer for you. But yeah, incredibly talented players, incredibly impactful games. That's all you really need to hear, as well as the personality involved in it as well. There's so much personality oozing out of players like Doinby that you just get to see if you are introduced to Rogue Warriors. That it's refreshing to see, and I'm really happy that now being able to broadcast in Shanghai, in China, that we do get interviews with these players, because beforehand it was like, man, they're basically in a box. Like, I don't know who these guys are. I don't know what their morals are. Like, you don't know what their point of view was. And now we have Clement on the team that we do get to have interviews. And then after doing the dancing on stage, he can come out and say "at me" on Weibo, literally, by the way, to the audience, saying that, like, if you guys want to flame my team, flame me. If you guys are flaming my build, well, guess what? I'm winning. like I love that shit. Like, being able to basically hear the players and hear the attitude that we didn't get to see before. So, I mean, if you're from North America, if you're from Europe is a little bit easier, but specifically you North American fans that are like, I need to go to sleep. like I'm not going to stay up to 2 or 4 a.m. Here's an added incentive.
And LCK is on at the same time.
Oh, even better. So ultimately, like, I ain't gonna fight for your love here. I'm not gonna do it.
Swoon me, Raz. Swoon me.
Make your decisions. I'm not gonna lead you to the water, but I'm gonna say make your decision whether it's gonna be LCK or LPL. But at the end of the day, VODs exist, and if you've chosen either, you should probably watch the VOD for the LPL or for the LCK, what you've missed. And then if the decision is to cut out EU or NA, then you know what? Go ahead and do that. That's fine. You can cut out a little bit out of your life so you can watch more LPL and LCK. No, I'm fine.
Yeah, who needs to watch Golden Guardians anyways, right?
Hey, man.
There you go. The biggest logic.
But no, if you have time out of your day, it's even harder because LPL has way more days and way more games.
Yeah.
Watch a few more. Just watch a few when you can. I'll make it easier to direct you into the best games as well. So, but make the effort, and hopefully the olive branch is sturdy enough so you don't just break it and be like, ah, shit, I'm staying. I'm going back to my own region. See ya. I'm done. Going back to EU.
Very nice. I think that was a very beautiful plug. Is there anything anything you guys would like to say to the people out there? Starting with you, Zento. Any more words? Any last words?
That was pretty solid. I think what's cool about the LPL region is that they have stuck to their guns at developing their own style, and I kind of wish that North America would do the same, and not in the sense of copying China or copying Korea, but it's to develop their own style and kind of stick to that. And like, as you were saying, Raz, have confidence in that style, especially when you get onto the international stage. And realistically, when you look at these different regions and their different styles, you probably aren't going to be better than that region at their own style, right? So copying Korea, you're always going to be one step behind because you have to look at their games in order to copy them, and they're always looking for that next new thing to improve their style, and then so therefore you have to copy that, and it becomes this never-ending game of catch up. And so if North America could try and develop its own style and actually look internally for their own meta, and maybe that's a possibility now with academy teams being these sort of sister teams to scrim against, and therefore you can create your own culture of ideology of how to play the game. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully NA trying to spice it up in the summer split.
Ashley, RG crushed the dreams and hopes of Kingzone. Of Peanut finally.
Hold on, wait a second.
Are you pushing with the surrogate?
Of Gorilla finally winning a title. I know it's sad. We were both sad, but at the end of the day, there is something to be said about China. What is your take on the region and how it compares to Korea?
Well, despite me being an LCK fan, I just think on that day the better team won. So, Kingdom really had to step their game up. Kingdom really needed to step their game up. They had a few holes in there, like how they were executing pretty much everything, and especially Udi just stepped up. And talking about that, so in the last Rift Rival, a lot of the people were criticizing LCK for not giving their best in the competition, while it looked like the LPL was really playing their hearts out. All the coaches were putting their heads together to scream each other to see, oh my god, how can we beat LCK? I think that really showed in the competition. And this year, with Rivals happening again, it's LMS versus LPL versus LCK. Given that it's going to be the top 4 teams, do you think that LPL is going to still do really well against LCK? Do you have any personal predictions, especially given that Rift Rivals this year has really interesting format?
I think it's going to be very strong on the side of LPL. I mean, I'm an LPL advocate, so I definitely, you know what I'm going to say. That being said, it's always the case of, I believe Kingzone is an incredibly strong team. I believe Kingzone is going to whoop the ass of, I'd say half of those teams, maybe all of them, who knows. So ultimately, I think LPL will win it again because they do put in a lot of value for these events. And I do think that our top side, or at least we're pretty top heavy in the sense that Invictus Gaming, Rogue Warriors are very good. Last time around, OMG was there. OMG had a lot of difficulties in how to make their style work, simply because they were very confident individual players, but when it came down to like actually playing team fights or playing as a team or getting the hell out of the side lane, if you're Icon, it didn't work out. Rogue Warriors are very, very focused on getting SMLZ ahead. So like their game plan is going to be very easy to scout for LCK teams, but the problem is being able to push them off that. So yeah, I think I haven't looked into the format just yet too heavily on that, but the LCK, I think that Kingzone would do well. I think that KT is going to do well. Africa should do well. Those 3 teams I think will be very cool to see. I have some doubts on SKT. Sure, like they have Faker, that's great, but Their team play and their jungle is a definite issue. So we'll see what happens from that frame point. I think it's going to be a two horse race. I'm sorry, LMS. I apologize.
For EU fans, of course, or for EU players, Rift Rivals is a great way to spend your vacation in LA, of course. Very nice time, because nobody in the EU cares about this tournament. Not at all. No, whatsoever. Rift Rivals, what is that even? Never heard of her.
You guys still have the trophy over at
right,
the studio,
we do.
I saw on like Travis's pictures or something. It's what the hell?
Yeah, I mean...
That's bullshit.
You guys care deep down. Wait a second.
Nah. we also, fun fact, we have Faker's keyboard when he won the 2015 World Championships. We have that.
Keyboard?
Huh?
I love how this particular player is in such a status that, oh my god, he has his keyboard. And everyone just goes crazy.
It's like a football player's shoes, you know? It's the instrument that you use.
Jordan's shoes.
Yeah, it's like, but
cool.
It's that one. It's the original one from the finals in the ULT studio. Anyway, Raz, you got to talk a lot. You got to smoothen us with your charm and way of words to watch LPL. Anything you would like to say to the fans watching out there?
I'm incredibly glad that you guys. It depends on, I don't know your state of mind, but if you guys actually enjoyed me just talking nonstop, thankfully I'm really happy about that. Also, I love for the LPL fans that have stuck through the split after split. Love you guys. I see you in chat. We actually try our hardest to communicate to people in chat, and sometimes you get people coming in there that are like pretty headstrong on the usual. I don't know if you guys watch the LPL Twitch chat at all, but you get a lot of debates, random debates happening, either TSM debates or
there's always a TSM debate.
Exactly. You just get a lot of debates because you have a lot of different people coming in at the same time. But ultimately, you see the same faces, and there are a lot of people that are really strong advocates, and hopefully, we have a lot more donning the Twitch chat. So come on by. I will say hello. Maybe even during chat. During cast. And if that's the case, you should shoot me off and focus on the cast. But yeah, that's it. Thank you guys for all the love we've been getting throughout this split and throughout MSI.
Awesome. Well, I, for one, welcome our new Chinese overlords. And I think that China this year has a great way, a great opportunity to make it far at Worlds, to truly do something historic and win Worlds potentially even. It's the year of the dog. No, it's the year of the dog. It's the year of the Uzi. It's the year where dynasties and legacies are broken. I've said this so many times. I predicted RNG would win MSI, and I say now that China at least has a chance, which is good. China has closed the gap a bit between Korea and themselves, and that's all what we want at the end of the day. I feel like just a chance.
Yeah, we'll see about that. We still have KSV and SKT playing possum on us, so we'll see what happens when World comes along and they suddenly become an incredibly strong team when they've had the same damn players. Like best of 5, man. I don't know. I have PTSD. So we'll see what happens in that time round. I think that's really cool is that even though we're talking about China doing well for themselves, but last time around, a lot of the European team specifically, I'm sorry, Anna, but the European teams are doing very well for themselves, like Misfits almost taking down SKT. So it's a strong possibility that teams like Fnatic, G2 can come through. Maybe Splice if that's the case for the third team. We'll find out on that soon enough. That they can actually just usurp a team. We'll see if that happens in a best of 5.
Now you're just trying to suck up to me, Raz. That's not gonna happen. I'm just kidding. Anyway, I thought this was lovely to hear so many amazing stories and so much insight to the LPL by Raz. Of course, make sure to follow him on Twitter, Ashley Kang on Twitter, IzentoGG on Twitter, Darius X Machina on Twitter. probably the hardest one to do. I'm still surprised that Twitter allows my username, given that it technically has sex in the name. But that's a whole different topic to talk about.
Wait a minute! Suddenly, this just got 2 hours.
Turn up events.
We got political.
Drifting over there to hold the discussion. No, okay, this was very lovely. If you're still watching or listening, thank you so much for your time. I hope you had a great time, as did we. And we'll see you next time around when it's up for another episode of League Around the World with a new topic. Make sure to write in the comments and everything. This was Izento, Ashley, Raz, and Darius. Hope you have a good day. Bye-bye.